joining us right now live from England, Hall of Famer, Gold Cup winner in 2000. I consider him a friend and one of the best that Canada has ever produced, Paul Peschisolido. Paul, welcome again, my friend.
Good evening. How are you?
I couldn't be better. Paul, we welcome you again, and we thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here. Paul, I invited you on here tonight to discuss the topic at hand, and that is a Canadian Professional Soccer League. And you had the opportunity, Paul, to play in the Canadian Soccer League, which was based coast to coast with the Toronto Blizzard, and you went to a final. And it was a league that I'm pretty sure you would agree, Paul, helped you and developed you to go on to bigger and better things in Europe. In your mind, Paul, how important is it that this country once again gets its own professional league coast to coast?
Oh, it has to be done, really. I think for myself, you know, coming out of school, 16, 17, playing in a good standard of football that Scarborough had back then, going into a professional league, playing against men in a competitive league. If it wasn't for that, then you know, I wouldn't be where I am today. You know, and I think it's essential until Canada gets a professional league where these kids have something to strive to go into and are getting better coaching and are playing a competitive game with with other professionals. Then we're gonna constantly struggle. You know, I've also seen the MLS now has 3 Canadian teams. You know, if we could make some type of law that allows 80% of the players have to be Canadian, even that would help, because having 3 teams in the MLS would be wonderful. And if 1 or 2 of the other provinces could get franchises in the league, and kids could play in these teams, which are mostly based with Canadian players, and the game of football in Canada will improve, and maybe we'll produce a Canadian team that's able to compete at a world stage.
Paul, I got to be honest, when the MLS was created and it kicked off, to me, that was the league that was there to cater and develop the U.S. player, and it has done a marvelous job. We've seen how wonderful the USA did in the last World Cup, and also the way they're developing players. And that's great for the U.S. player, but I speak selfishly, Paul, and I want a Canadian soccer league back again so we can develop our own, so we can have our own ownership groups, proud Canadians to own clubs and to sell players. That's where I stand, Paul.
No, without a shadow of doubt. I think you make a good point. The Americans have used that, and as a result, look at how well they've competed in the World Cup, and they've gone to strength and strength and produced some wonderful footballers. So yes, it's very important that we have a league, we have professional franchises throughout the country that are doing the same for our boys. Whether it be like you say, a professional league that can compete, or trying to get 7 or 8 franchises across the country that are in the MLS that produce only Canadian players, and like I said, only have a majority of 70 or 80% being Canadian and not American, and foreign players. That's the only way forward I can see.
Paul, what did you learn, not only as a player on the field from some of the veterans that help you with the Toronto Blizzard, but also away from the field? What did you learn about the game and being a professional that helped you down the road?
Well, your whole outlook on life is different. You have to behave like a professional. You have to put in the extra work. You're now competing against men, so you have to look after your body. You learn about diet. You learn about the mental side of it. Because you're thrusted into these games. I think it made a great grounding for me to go to England and be successful.
How important is it, Paul, in your mind, you're talking to us live from England, and you know Europe quite well, that youth clubs, big youth clubs in Ontario and in Canada get involved this time around with real professional clubs, so they can funnel through the system players that can play professional soccer, and you can see the little boys looking up to some of those players through the system and say, hey, I want to play in this real Canadian professional soccer league. How important is that we ingrain that in the young boys' mind here in Canada?
Well, absolutely. It's essential once again, because these kids want to believe that when they finish or when they get to a certain age, that they can make a living out of playing the sport that they love, and it gives them to strive towards. You know, if there isn't anything there, kids will pursue other things, and they won't put in the same effort and the hard work and the graft that you need to become professional. And you know, we've seen that, you know, at the ages of 13, 14, 15, our leagues in Canada are wonderful. You know, I remember myself playing for Guildwood and Wexford and Scarborough Blues. You know, we used to go to Europe, and we would beat top teams in Europe. But the problem I see is, you know, at the age 15, 16, everybody went to do their own thing because, you know, well, there was a professional game which helped, but there was only a small amount of players that went into it because, you know, you really couldn't make a living from that, you know, the CSL back then. It was more of a part-time thing. But if we could create what the Americans have created, then by all means, it can only be helpful for our own talent.
Let me ask you this, Paul. We're seeing now the last couple of years top-notch American players like Clint Dempsey, like Adu, Michael Bradley here with Toronto, coming back to play in their own domestic league. It's no longer that they desire to go overseas. They want to stay here. In your mind, Paul, do you believe it is time that the Canadian young player, if they're talented enough, if they're good enough, needs to concentrate on trying to crack the lineup of an MLS team? Or should they, in your mind, still go to Europe and ply their trade there?
Good question. Good question. In my opinion, if it was my child, I would encourage them to go to Europe still. I know the American League and the MLS, it's a fantastic league, but I still believe that the schooling and the education you get of football in Europe is far greater than what the MLS has. I think it's good. Don't get me wrong. I think it's good, and I think they're getting so much better and they're getting far more competitive. But still, if it was my child, I'd encourage him to go to Europe and get the proper, the proper schooling, the proper education that a footballer gets in this country, because I think it's superior still.
Well, let me ask you the million-dollar question then, Paul. You would know this better than I. I have a son that's 16. I had an older son that is in the system as well, and I'm confused and I'm debating whether or not to send my 16-year-old over to Europe this season. At what age do you believe that young Canadian player should make their way over there if they really have this dream and if honestly they do have that talent that some people have recognized?
Yeah. Not only do you have to have talent, though, you need to be lucky and you need to be dedicated, and you need to be prepared to sacrifice because it's a different culture in Europe, you know, and it isn't easy. But I would suggest that when the child is ready and they're really hungry and you feel they're mentally ready as well as physically ready, and they're talented enough, then I would encourage them to go as soon as. I think now the academies in this country and probably all of Europe, what they're being taught in these academies is phenomenal, and you don't want to miss that type of development for your kids. So I'd encourage them to go as soon as possible.
Paul, let me ask you this. Obviously here in this country, in this province specifically, there has been a war in many areas in this province in regards to academies and clubs. Maybe now things have started to change a bit, but you've seen it in Europe. How important is it that academies and clubs both coexist, that they both can bring fruit to the table in regards to development of players?
Oh, it's once again essential, and it's the same old problem. I think the same thing happened when I was back home. All the different leagues were all competing against one another, and until we get one system that everybody believes in and everybody's buying into, you're going to have all these little breakaway things. It'll never work, and it sounds like the same problems are occurring. Everybody has to be on the same hymn sheet. We all got to work together to get one structure in place for the entire country, so that we can continue to develop and stop, having this selfishness of everybody wanting their league, or they want their own, this academy to do this and this academy to do that. It has to be one structure for everyone so that we're all on the same hymn sheet. It's so important. And I can't stress enough that, I was hoping that was rectified, and if it hasn't, then we need to look at that.
It's absolutely gotten worse and not better. I got to be honest with you, Paul. I had the opportunity today to speak with Alex Bunbury, Dino Lopez, and many players that you know from the past, and they're all adamant about getting a Canadian Professional Soccer League. They believe it's vital. But something that came out of our conversations, Paul, and I want you to touch upon this, is also the coaching department. And I believe that if we are going to get a real pro-Canadian Soccer League coast to coast, that we need to implement young Canadian coaches be involved as head coaches so we can develop them instead of always going overseas or down to South America. Your thoughts, Paul?
100%, 100%. We have the same problem here in England. When you look at Spain, I think they have like 6,000 or 7,000 A-licensed qualified coaches, and they all don't work in the professional game. So that's filtering down to the academies. That's filtering down to the local clubs. If you have coaches, again, that aren't on the same hymn sheet and are teaching different ways of and wrong ways of playing the game, then you have a problem. So it is so important that we coach coaches. Absolutely, I think that's something that needs to be put in place. Gone are the days where you have one of the lads' father who runs the hockey team as well as runs the soccer team and has no idea what he's doing. We need to educate coaches so that when they're educating our children on how to play the game, they're doing it properly.
And where do you stand on, Paul, if we're going to start this Canadian Professional Soccer League? Obviously, at the youth ages, we want to develop these players to become well-rounded players and to go on to play for Canada and hopefully one day get to the World Cup. But where do you stand at winning at all costs like some of these young coaches still want to do? I mean, I still see it with my young son that these coaches still want to win this $2 trophy, this $2 medal. They will bench all the players if they can, if they make a mistake, and they could care less except for their self-ego.
Absolutely. That is poison. That is absolutely poison. We cannot have coaches that are doing it for their own personal pride and their own, to get that medal. It's imperative that stops. It has to be about the developing of the kids to the point at the ages of perhaps, from the ages from 5 to 10, they should be playing mini football, small-sided games, 3v3s. Score shouldn't even be taken into consideration. I know a lot of people will say, "What are you talking about? They need to learn to win. They need to learn to lose." At that age, they shouldn't, and they shouldn't have any parents' interference. It should be the coaches. They should play 3v3 so the children are getting loads and loads of touches. There's no point playing 11-a-side at the ages of 5 to 10 because you'll have a player who doesn't touch the ball. We need to encourage them to get constant contact on the ball, touches, working on getting the ball in tight areas, getting close-knit control. That needs to be important. Then from the ages of perhaps 10, you could start to develop into 7-a-side, and I don't think they should be playing 11-a-side probably until they hit 11, 12. And again, the results shouldn't be important. It should be about the development. It should be about a progression of play, how the game is played now, where it's thrown out from the back. The defenders the fullbacks are pushing on. Center halves are getting the ball under pressure. That's what's important. That's what we've got to do. If we're going to teach our kids to play under pressure and to keep possession, which is a huge problem. If you cannot keep the ball under pressure, then you are never going to be successful, and that's the problem we have in Canada.
Paul, let me ask you this before we close off on this topic, and then very quickly, I know it's late at night for you at home. I want to talk to you about the 2000 Gold Cup winning team, but the last topic is this in regards to the Canadian Soccer League that we'd like to see resurrected once again coast to coast, and it's simply this, Paul. Designated players. For me, if we're going to start this league where there's rumors out there that possibly it could happen in the next couple of years coast to coast in this country, I would only allow for a maximum of 2 designated players. Where would you stand on that?
Absolutely, there has to be a maximum without a shadow of a doubt. I understand that it's a business, and you want to, you might want to get some big names to the grounds to encourage support. Absolutely, and I don't see a problem with that. And I think bringing in players of a good quality will raise the standard of your own home players 100%. I've always liked back in the old Serie A where they had the 3 stranieri, the three imports. I think that would be a maximum for me, and and that's it. I wouldn't go for any more than that, because this is about developing our own players. We have fallen behind all the countries, as far as I'm concerned, on an international stage, and we've got to get back.
You're 100% bang on, and you speak to many people here in this country. They're upset. They're tired of not getting to the World Cup like the USA does it time and time again, because the talent is here, Paul. You're bang on with that. Paul, just before we let you go, we can't let you go without talking about this team being inducted into the Hall of Fame coming in a couple months. I tell you what, Paul, on one hand, I can count how many times I've been brought to tears, but that day I was brought to tears when this team won that Gold Cup. And I'll never forget, my sons and I were sitting in our house with our Canada jerseys on, cheering Canada on, where today in Canada you don't see that at all unless it's hockey. What a moment that was for you. Talk about it, how it all unraveled for the better.
To be honest, it's still a blur. It's still a blur, and I still can't believe it. You know, it was probably on a bigger scale of when Greece won the Euros. You know, there was no right for us to win it, none whatsoever. But we just galvanized as a team, and we got stronger and stronger as the tournament progressed. We had some outstanding solo performance from Craig Forrest, who I've never seen a goalkeeper perform at that level. I've never seen any goalkeeper at any level perform to that extent. He kept us in the tournament at times. But we played. It's just one of those things. We played out of our skin. Every player, from 1 to 18, played out their skin, and it was just incredible. I can't even describe it, because it was so surreal, and it's still surreal now. But it was one heck of an achievement for us, and one that I'll never forget as long as I live. You
know, Paul, you talk about this team and the way it all gelled together, the way they all battled for one another, and you look at the great mix that was on this team, the veterans and the youngsters. You look at a Paul Fenwick, you look at a Greg Forrest, the veterans, then you look at Carlo Corazine, yourself that put the ball in the back of that, Richard Hastings. I mean, we could go on and on. This team just gelled and wanted to represent their country and left blood, sweat, and tears out there. And about 80% of them, if I'm not mistaken, Paul, played and plied their trade overseas in Europe. And a few of them, like Dwayne De Rosario, were here in North America. But it all worked, and it all worked at a special, special way.
It did, and I think you make a good point in the fact that there were some older players, some younger players, and I think as an older player, what we did, we kind of galvanized it ourselves. You know, we took it on ourselves to make sure that we all bonded. We had a great camaraderie between each of the players, on and off the pitch. We socialized together, which is very important. And it's very difficult to run through a brick wall for someone you don't like. And we all liked one another, and we're prepared to do that little bit of extra work for our mates. You know, if he made a mistake, you wanted to make sure you rectified it so it didn't cost you. And that's what carried us through. And to this day, you know, I still speak to some of the players from that team, and it was one heck of an achievement for a Canadian team to do that. For another Canadian team to do that in the near future looks almost impossible, which is a shame.
Yeah, you're right. You're bang on once again, Paul. But it was a special team in my heart and many Canadians' hearts. Paul, we'll let you go with this. We're going to give you the platform. I want you to speak to Canadian coaches, Canadian parents, Canadian players. I want you to speak from your heart. What do you want to get across to them that means so much to you as a Canadian-born citizen now living in Europe, looking over here what's going on?
Well, I'd just like to say we've all got to work together on this. You know, football is the biggest, the best sport in the world. And if we want to compete at an international stage, it's important that we all put our egos aside and we all work together to try to make the Canadian team a better team. The only way we're going to do this is by working together, is by developing our kids from an early age, not worry about results, trying to, teach them the game, teach them how to control the ball, manipulate the ball, not win at all costs. We must coach coaches. We have to have people going out there who love the game and learn the game, and work on trying to coach our youngsters to become professionals. It's just so important that we all work together. It really is. And, I hope the CSA or the Canadian Soccer Association or whoever's organizing the minute looks at that and really makes a conscious effort of changing things, because it's not working, it's getting worse, and until we all sit back and find a solution and all sing from the same hymn sheet, we're not going to improve.
Paul Peschisolido, you're a class act. You're a great human being and a guy that cares for your country of Canada. We thank you so much for staying up in the wee hours of the morning. And again, God bless you. You're a Hall of Famer and a guy that always gave it 110%. Every time I watched you and every time you played, you always left it out there. Paul, thanks again for joining us. We'll get you back on again, because I got to tell you, people have always asked me to get you back on because you're vital to this country, and hopefully one day we can get back. We can get you back here to working in some capacity. Paul, thanks again, my friend.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And that would give me great joy to come back and know that I'd come back and help the national team, or help, produce young kids and produce a league. If there was anything I could do, I'd be on the next plane over, because, like you said, it's very important that we improve in Canada. And
outstanding. Paul Peschisolido, thanks again, and we'll talk to you in the near future, my friend.